In a world governed by the pursuit of absolute perfection, where immaculate precision reigns supreme, the question arises, what's wrong with pure, perfect analogue audio? Delving deep into the realm of sonic enchantment, one may ponder why society yearns for the allure of digital complexities, when the pure, untainted melodies of analogue offer an authentic and unadulterated experience. Perhaps it is the very limitations of analogue audio, its gentle imperfections and delicate flaws that captivate the human soul. For it is within the whispered cracks and elegant distortions of analogue sound that the essence of raw emotion lies, a testament to the human touch that elevates mere sound to the realm of artistry. In summary, what's wrong with pure perfect analogue audio? The digital versus analogue debate will probably never end, but I have to wonder if we're asking ourselves the right questions. Digital versus analogue usually means digital versus vinyl, and to a lesser extent, digital versus high-end cassette. And happily we have a range of analogue sources to listen to, not just vinyl and cassette, but also FM radio, and, for the financially blessed, reel-to-reel tape. I'll leave AM radio out of this. It has its uses, but it's never going to be hi-fi. So why do people listen to analogue audio? For vinyl enthusiasts, it seems to be largely about the visual and tactile experience. There's nothing in digital audio to compete with vinyl sleeve art, and despite my own preference for digital, I still have a certain nostalgia for handling the record, putting it on the turntable, and carefully lowering the stylus, and the phasey, swishy sense of expectation before the music begins. What about cassette? Well, in the low end, cassettes can be fun, cheap and cheerful, make your own mixtape. Or at a higher price point, hi-fi cassette enthusiasts can copy whatever source they can find to cassette and enjoy their audio through that medium. Personally, I can't see the point, but if people enjoy it, why not? FM radio is more of a conundrum. I can get all the radio I want through my satellite TV box, in relatively good quality without interference or background noise. I used to own a high-end tuner, which in today's money cost me £1,000, but when I got my satellite TV box, it just gathered dust, so I sold it. I don't miss it. Having said that, digital radio, DAB, in the UK is a mess. Audio quality is poor due to the outdated codec, and bit rates are generally too low for decent sound. BBC radio is passable, but when weather gets in the way of good signal strength, the distortion, which sounds like a bubbling mud pool, is dreadful. DAB Plus apparently is better, but there's almost as much debate about that as there is vinyl versus digital. I might look at it in a future video. Let me know in the comments. But all of this analogue stuff is the past. There hasn't been a new vinyl cutting lathe built since the 1980s, AFAIK. There are no new cassette decks available with the essential Dolby noise reduction. FM radio hasn't changed since the 1970s. And reel-to-reel is frighteningly expensive for home use. But what if we applied 21st century technology to analogue audio? Imagine if we could have an analogue audio format with a frequency response above 30 kHz, well above what anyone can hear, signal-to-noise ratio better than 120 dB, the dynamic range of human hearing, and distortion less than, say, 0.1%. No one can hear that. 0.01%. If we could have that, we would have the perfect analogue format. I'm thinking recorded product. Radio would be a whole different thing. There are things to think about here, but first I'm going to give my idea a name. I think that perfect analogue format will have to do for now. I don't know whether it will be a disc, a cube, a sphere, a convex isogonal non-prismatic solid. Could it be like a computer chip but with wriggly analogue-y stuff going on inside rather than digital bits? This I don't know, but the concept of the perfect analogue format is certainly worth exploring. So the perfect analogue format has specifications way beyond the limits of human hearing. I'd rather like it if the only way this could be achieved was a 12-inch disc, so we could have sleeve art back, gatefold sleeves, and maybe a few 21st century innovations in presentation. Everything's looking good so far. So let's dial this back a few notches. What are we going to listen to on this format? Clearly, it's mostly going to be music that's already been recorded. We have half a century and more of music recorded in hi-fi quality. And it's probably going to take another half century to overtake that. So for music that's already been recorded, this is a limiting factor. But of course, a lot of it could be remastered, or going a notch further back, remixed. I don't mean remastered in the current sense of the word, which means making good recordings sound worse. I mean remastered in the sense of eking out every last molecule of value from existing recordings, so that they sound the very best they can. Aha, we encounter a problem. What format do we remaster these wonderful recordings to? Would it be the perfect analogue format or a digital format, which also has specifications beyond the range of human hearing? I'd have to say that remastering digitally kills the whole concept. I'm a digital believer, not a skeptic. So audio-wise, this wouldn't bother me, but it will bother a lot of people. People who would like there to be a perfect analogue format, and in that format, music is free from any kind of digital contamination. So, for this to work, remastering or mastering of newly recorded music must be to the perfect analogue format. Let mastering commence. So now we have one perfect disc fresh from the mastering process. I'm calling it a disc because, as I said, I'd probably like it to be a disc. How can we distribute this to the masses? Well, we'd have to make copies of this disc. This might be done by stamping or moulding, pretty much like vinyl or CD. Or perhaps there could be something like laser engraving. Maybe holography will be part of the process. The thing is, though, that digital copies are perfect replicas of the original masters. There's no difference between a master and a copy, unless there have been errors or manufacturing defects. But analogue copying always causes degradation. The signal-to-noise ratio, for instance, will be at least 3 decibels worse. Any deviations from accuracy in this near-perfect format will be doubled on each generation of replication. So like vinyl, there will be one single real master. From this, a small number of submasters will be made. Then from these, the final product will be manufactured. 3 generations. Oh, and for overseas markets, there'll be an extra generation. 4 generations. So if what we have in the mastering studio is the perfect analogue format, what gets into people's listening rooms is up to 3 generations less than perfect. 9 decibels less signal to noise, 8 times, maybe more, other degradations. Someone check my counting. We no longer have the perfect analogue format. But hey, not all is lost. We're in century 21 and we can do fantastic things. We can design an analogue audio format that is 8 times better than perfect. 8 times better than anyone can hear. So even through 3 or 4 generations, perhaps even more, what people buy and take home to their listening rooms is perfect. So let's suppose it's 10 years' time and the perfect analogue format is released into the market. Mastering studios are prepared with their ultra-perfect equipment and they're getting to work analogising the music of the past. Fantastic. So where does music production go with this? Currently, pretty much everything is recorded using digital audio workstation software. It's all digits. How can digits translate into the analogue world? We get back to that idea of digital contamination. I'll just say again that it doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. And if we have the perfect analogue format, well, it does make sense to keep everything as analogue as possible. It may be the case that developing the perfect analogue format is difficult, and though stereo becomes practical, multitrack for the recording studio is some way off, comparable to the early days of tape recording. So, artists and bands would still record in their digital audio workstations, but mix and master to perfect analogue, from which, naturally, perfect digital copies could be made for die-hard digitophiles. And like the old SPARS code for CDs, we would have codes for perfect analogue discs. DAA, D for a digital audio multitrack, A for analogue mixing and mastering, and of course always A for the end product. New recordings that are made straight to stereo, as has traditionally been the case with classical music, can be AAA immediately. And when perfect analogue multitrack has been invented, all music can be delivered to the listening room in pure, perfect AAA. So, everything's lovely. Analogically lovely. Or is it? I think that what I've said so far, if the perfect analogue format could exist, makes sense, and everyone will be happy. But I can foresee that some people won't be so happy. Vinyl enthusiasts. Audiophiles. I think that the people who will enjoy perfect analogue audio will just be ordinary people who like good sound. People who see the world as analogue, which, unless you go down to the level of DNA, it is. And they want to consume their music in a natural way, not chopped up into bits and then reconstituted like packet soup, and have great sleeve art. But vinyl enthusiasts, well, they've just lost what made their hobby special. Ordinary people can now enjoy perfect analogue audio, and there are zero scratches, zero noise and distortion for practical purposes, and frequencies so high that no one could even hear them. Of course, vinyl enthusiasts can still go crate digging and find stuff that isn't and never will be released in perfect form. Or they can buy vinyl at £1,000 a pop from a high-end vinyl dealer. I didn't intend that pun, but it does seem to work. And doubtless there will be businesses set up to transcribe good vinyl copies to perfect analogue audio, where the master tapes no longer exist. Spotify does that with digital already. Listen to some older, out-of-the-way music and you will hear vinyl artifacts. But vinyl, as an audiophile interest, will surely just die out over time. And the world is now all happiness and smiles. So, am I on some flight of fancy here? Well, in one sense, no. I absolutely believe that with 21st century technology, an analogue format could be developed that is as good as 24-bit digital, and perhaps better. But other than that, I see difficulties. The main difficulty here is that 99% of music lovers don't care about how their music gets to them. If it gets to them in mono on a single speaker phone, there's a good 10% doesn't mind. No one cares whether their music is analogue or digital. No one other than 1% or probably even less. Digital is and will continue to be more convenient and, as we know, will always be superior in its total lack of generation loss. But I have to hope that the perfect analogue format will be developed, if only for the high-end audio market. And if I can't afford it myself, well, I can still admire it.
Why does he get to do the prologue and we have to wait until the end?
If we get to do the prologue, who's going to watch the video all the way through?
But at least we get to have the last word, Betty. What is the last word?
Soon. See you soon.